Hello, I'm Chris Christodoulou. I am usually writing music for video games. Sometimes I just write music for myself. I worked on, most recently on Risk of Rain 2, and I have been working with Hopu for a while. We did their previous title, Deadbolt, and Risk of Rain 1.
Yeah. So, Chris, how did you fall into composing music for specifically video games?
I fell into it by trying to fall into it because it was just something that I wanted to do. I was a gamer pretty early on, and I studied music. At some point I did a master's that was music for film. I really wanted to go into game music, and I just fought for it by essentially like putting out a small portfolio and starting emailing developers and trying to figure out, hey, I see you're about to make a game, maybe I can help. And eventually like one thing led to another, and I kind of just, put my foot in the door there. And from then on, it's pretty much history. I think Risk of Rain 1 was my third video game project, if I remember correctly.
So talk about some of the inspirations and what's involved when you're making music, specifically for a sequel like Risk of Rain 2. Like, where did you draw inspiration from the first game, and how did you take and expand on those themes in its sequel?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was really tricky to figure out how the new soundtrack would expand on the original. And one thing that I really wanted to do is I wanted it to feel like it's a continuation, but also that it's not a repetition, So I borrowed a lot of themes, like some of the core themes that went into the first game are making an appearance in the next game, in the new game. But I think there's a lot of new inspiration regarding like the sound palette, things like that have changed a lot. I can go into specifics if you want, like, if I were to put it in a nutshell, I'd say the first game is kind of more 80s, 90s inspired. A lot of my childhood influences are there, and now it's a little bit more 70s, more synthy, a lot of like acoustic drums versus like more electronic stuff in the first one, things like that. But and also that it's much more expanded. For example, we have compositions that are like 7 minutes, 12 minutes long, and in the first game it's a bit shorter. So it's kind of it leans a little bit more into the progressive rock sound of the 70s instead of more the like 80s, more rock pop kind of thing that the first game was.
Do you think that living in Greece kind of gives you more of a, specifically for the music industry or music genre, it gives you more of like exposure than as opposed to living in like the United States?
I'm not sure. I can't really quantify it in the sense that I can't predict how my career or my exposure into the gaming world would be different if I was in the United States. I guess one of the things I'm kind of missing out on is like being able to like attend conventions and stuff like that. But I can't say that I've really felt like a burden or anything, but not on the other side. I don't think it has helped me in any particular way. It's just the way it is. It helps me personally in the sense that I feel comfortable being here. But other than that, I wouldn't say that it's like it's one or the other, that it's better or worse. It's the great thing about the state of things right now is that we have the internet, and for example, my collaboration with Hopu, we hadn't seen each other on camera until the second game. We just talked through email and chats and stuff like that. But it's the first time I've seen him was like about two and a half years ago.
Have you ever done any music work for television, film, or streaming services? And if not, do you want to?
When I was in Amsterdam, I did a couple of years that was like a master's in film music, and during that time I had the chance to do a lot of short films. And eventually I did a full-length film. I think it was 2016 with like a Greek director. It was his first film, and actually he found me through video games. Funny enough, it was not through my film work that he discovered me. It's been fun. It's something that I do enjoy. It's a very different thing from video games because of the medium, because of the restrictions that you have, especially with time. You have to score to a scene, and be very specific. I can compare it to like scoring a cutscene for a video game, perhaps. And it's something that I enjoy, but it's not something that I pursue with the same passion that I do video games, because just video games is what I love to do. I do enjoy scoring a film or something like that, but yeah.
Can you elaborate a bit more? Like, is your creative process differently when you're making music for a video game as opposed to a film or a short film, vice versa?
Yeah, I think it's quite different. Besides the strictly technical stuff that you have to conform into the time, as I mentioned before. So if you have sometimes in film you might have to score a 50-second scene, for example, or sometimes you have to score like a 6-minute scene, and you have to pace yourself differently. And also there's always a collaboration with the director or the developer that will give you, direction and what to do. But I usually find that working in film, a director is much more involved in the decisions of, where the music will go. Film also has this kind of, it's a bit different in the sense that you are, there are exceptions in video games too. I don't want this to sound like weird, but in film it's almost all the time that you need to be focused on developing an arc within the film. So you start your music from somewhere, it develops with the characters or the plots and all that stuff, and it goes somewhere. And sometimes maybe in a video game that doesn't happen so purposefully. Sometimes you just write for a video game and you just you're writing music for a level, like a backdrop for someone to play, so this strict, arc maybe is not there so much. Again, there are exceptions. I don't mean to sound, weird or anything to other fellow composers or, I'd say these are the main differences I find, like collaboration with the director and conforming with the medium, like in terms of time and stuff. Yeah.
And then growing up, did you have any inspirations from classical video game music or other types of music, as well as modern inspirations for your work?
Yeah, for sure. I'm one of those composers who doesn't have like the typical. A lot of composers have like the Japanese school, for example, is huge for a lot of composers. For me, because of the games I played, I used to play a lot of adventure games. So essentially the soundtracks of LucasArts are kind of like one of my hugest influences. I used to have a Game Boy, so a lot of like the Super Mario music, the Tetris music. And I want to say that sometimes it's not so much about a particular composer, but about a style or an orchestration. So for example, to me, the very sound of the Game Boy is an influence, and not just any composer, just the sound itself, or the Sega Master System that I used to own, so sometimes when I work, I look for these sounds. I look for like reverse engineering, I will do a search and see, okay, what kind of chip did the Game Boy have, and how can I approximate the sound to a degree? And instead of saying I want to copy the style of composer X or something, one of my biggest influences in very musical terms is the music of Peter McConnell, who wrote for a lot of LucasArts titles, but one of the main titles that he scored himself is Grim Fandango, which is like a jazz soundtrack, and I just love that soundtrack to death. It's definitely one of my favorites. Jesper Kyd is one of my go-to huge inspirations, especially his soundtrack for Hitman 2, for example, which is like a brilliant orchestral soundtrack that is kind of also incorporates like the world trotting element that Hitman has, and traveling and bringing influences into the music. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could go on, but I think these should be enough.
You know, it's funny you mentioned like the LucasArts games like Monkey Island, because I interviewed the composers a few years ago, and the amount what they had to do to get the sound that they wanted into the game the way they wanted to do it was really insane. Like the stuff that they did was very janky, cutting edge janky, and like new, because they tried to get you all these new sounds in the game. How do you feel how has technology helped you create sounds and music for your composing, like in terms of just how technology it gets so much, like you have your keyboard and your setup right behind you, you can almost make everything you need with a keyboard and an iPad now, just about.
Yes.
How has that helped you creatively?
That is very true. If you don't mind, like a small asterisk, just because you mentioned like Monkey Island, and Michael Land did the music for Monkey Island, and there's actually a huge like reference to his music for the Dig in the Risk of Rain 2 soundtrack, because I love that soundtrack a lot. And the technology you were referring to is the iMuse system, which is essentially like truly revolutionized music in games. If somebody goes and listens to Monkey Island 2, it's like a great example to see how this comes into play. And as to how I and modern composers currently work, yes, definitely technology is a huge thing. I would say, as you said, you can pretty much do whatever you want. We have all the sounds in the world in our disposal. We have samples. We don't need to spend thousands of dollars to buy physical instruments, because we have software modeling of everything. This is great. These are great resources for a young composer. And I personally use it all the time. I'm a kind of a one-man band, from composing to mastering, and it would never have been possible if I didn't have the technology behind me to support this. And on a second level, the technology that we have after we write all the music is also great, because we have a lot of there are a lot of advances right now into how we implement our music in the game. So there's, beyond just writing like a piece of music, the ways that we can incorporate it into a game, they're pretty much limitless. And the fact that we can do that with audio instead with MIDI, like in the time of Monkey Island, and so we have the benefit of having the pristine quality CD sound, and the flexibility, let's say, of MIDI, and manipulating and triggering whatever we want and all that stuff. This is all great. Yeah. Personally, if you take a look at my studio, I don't really own hardware stuff. Everything is mostly just a PC that has a lot of stuff there. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to, just to clarify, there's a lot of benefits to, if I want to record a solo violin, for example, samples can only take me so far. But even that, I don't need to rent a high-end studio at this time. I can basically, with spending a little bit of money to, like soundproof my space, I just can find a person and bring them in and have a decent microphone of my own and record it. So yeah, technology is huge and allows everybody to kind of equalizes the field a little bit. Yeah.
So a lot of older games as well as new games are getting limited edition records being re-released. What are your thoughts on vinyl making a comeback?
I'm torn. I love physical editions. I love them a lot. I love the huge art on vinyl. I love the ritual of playing a vinyl. I do love that. You clean it up a little bit. You put it. You maybe you have a little drink at your hand. You drop the needle. You hear a little bit of a crackle and stuff, and then the music starts playing. And you spend 25 minutes to listen to a whole side. You flip the side. It's a much more involved process. Even with a CD, it's a much more involved process. I remember myself, coming home from school, putting on a CD, spending like an hour next to the stereo with headphones and enjoying that, and that has been a huge part of my musical education. And I'm sometimes I feel bad that I don't do it as much because I have, you know, the ease of the MP3 or the Spotify or whatever. On the other hand, I'm not a guy who's fixated on the medium. Personally, I don't care if it's vinyl, if it's a CD, if it's anything. So I don't mind, I don't care that the vinyl has made a comeback, but I do enjoy that the physical edition has made a comeback. You know, this is great. Yeah, I love that people do that and invest in it.
And then the last question I have for you is, what advice would you give to aspiring people who want to compose music specifically for video games?
Okay, I will give a very specific answer, especially for people who want to compose for video games. And my answer is, stop listening to video game music. They should educate themselves with other music. I see this all the time. People are kind of getting caught into an event horizon of video game music, and we especially new composers, we don't expand anymore. I see it all the time with people comparing music that I write to current day video game music when they should be looking at 40 years ago to music that it was popular or whatever, or classical, you know, things like that. And what I mean to say is that don't educate yourself as much as possible and listen to as much as music as you can. Because if you bring, you know, the influences of the couple of people that are around you, you're not expanding the medium, you're kind of honing it into a uniform sound. So don't add to that. You know, bring a lot of influences and be broad and do crazy things that haven't been done and try to be unique. You know, don't focus on, you know, I just love, I don't know, Journey so much, so I'll try to write like Austin Wintory or something. You know, just educate yourself with a lot of music and read books.